Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
And welcome to Pauline's Cooking Show. No, I'm kidding. So, today I thought I would talk to you guys about my life, and today is a lifetime story starring Stephen King. No, I'm kidding. But basically, I wanted to go through my life using rubber sheet geometry. And as we all know, rubber sheet geometry, we are allowed to bend a structure, we're allowed to twist it, we can stretch it, we can make it smaller, but we can't necessarily break or tear it. And the way that I see rubber sheet geometry is the same way that I see my family. There's a very strong bond, we're very closely connected, and you can bend us and you can twist us, but there are some things that you truly can't take away from us and you can't just glue back together. So, today I'm going to be using croissant dough just because it's very stretchable and it's easy to roll up, and a lot of the dough that you try to use just kind of like with flour and water can kind of crumble. So that'd be a terrible representation of my family, so that'd be counterproductive of what we're trying to do today. So we're going to start at the very beginning, and before I was born, what was that? I should have used Play-Doh, but this is authentic, just like my family.
Oh.
You see? Right
You're
there.
good. Very good one.
Okay. So basically, before I was born, my grandma Judy, she comes from a long line of Italians, and she's a stubborn Italian. Something funny that you guys should know is she has a swear jar because all she does is swear, and the only Italian she knows is actually the swear words, which is the only Italian you need to know. So basically, she had 3 children. She had my father, who's the middle child. She had my Uncle Jeff, who's the oldest, and then she had my Aunt Lori. And my Aunt Lori never had kids, but my Uncle Jeff had two children, and they were born after I was born. Now the thing is, before I was born, my grandma had to provide for my dad's family. And so you could say that in many ways, it was like a small dish. A small dish with a center in the center, with a hole in the center, maybe for like garnishes or for like, dipping sauce, or maybe like pasta or something. So it'd be a little small, little plate. And that'd be provide for the whole entire family. And everyone would eat off of this. But when I was born, and when all my cousins were born, that plate would eventually stretch, and stretch, and stretch. So, instead of providing for a small dish like my grandma would always have to do, she would instead provide for a giant dish, which would feed not only me, but the rest of my cousins and my family that came later on in my life. So, and the wonderful thing about actually eating at my grandma's house was you would always have copious amount of food. I mean, she would make a feast for one person. And I think honestly it's because of my cousins who came in and because of my family. And so the thing is, my grandma, she would always make amounts and amounts and amounts of pasta. She was always this amazing pasta cook. And the thing about her pasta was, you could never tell where it would start or where it would begin. Or, well, that's actually the same thing. But you could never tell where it would start and where it would actually end. And the thing about it was, you could take a fork, and you could twist it, and you could twist it, but for what you would think, it all looked the same. It all just seemed like one giant pile. And you would think it's just some weird entity. And so, the thing about it is, if you were to untwist it, and just for today, we are going to actually separate these to get to my next example. But anyways, as you would try to unravel this, maybe you would notice that maybe little bits of pieces of spaghetti would actually come undone. Just kind of so that way you can actually eat the food. And we get to the next part. When I got older, I actually moved away from Massachusetts, where I was born, and I moved to Georgia. And my mom, she was actually going through a separation with my dad. And the thing about my dad and my mom is, although they got married, they honestly got married because of trying to start a family. And the truth was, they weren't really right for each other. And something that we learned in rubber sheet geometry is the idea of equivalence by distortion. Now the thing is, I could stretch this, and I can try to glue this together, but nothing's going to really happen. I mean, yes, these are very similar structures, but they're not the same one. Deforming this into something else is not ever going to make this. And the thing is, like my mother, who tried to keep the marriage going, and unlike my dad, who wanted to lead a life of his own, they were 2 separate people. So essentially, my parents were inequivalent to each other, and their marriage did not work. So, moving on from there, when times kind of got tough and the divorce was necessarily having a hard time on our family, my grandma, she would make these wonderful Italian cookies called torellis. And torellis are these wonderful, almost donut-shaped cookies that basically you would dip in like coffee and everything. So you'd have something like this, where you'd have a donut shape, which you could almost see as a tortellini. And it looks very similar to a pretzel. Imagine a pretzel, except for without the interconnecting that they have. It's just a simple circle. Well, from there, you can make, or we can attempt to make, because this is very, very difficult material to be working with, but you can attempt to make a coffee. And from that coffee,
I see it, Steve. It's
ta-da! You can tell that my little niece made this coffee cup. So, but anyways, so basically, you can bend and you can shape a family, and you can go through tough times, and sometimes necessarily through distortion. Things don't necessarily go right, but the truth is, behind all of it, there are fundamental structures, and there are things that are truly strong within a family. So, this is my life, and this is my presentation.
Yay!
And for everyone, I have the smaller ones are regular croissants, and then I've got chocolate croissants here. Which, by the way, when you're using the material, if you look at the triangles, they have negative curvature.
Snap!
So, if you guys want, after everyone's done with their presentations, you're more than welcome to come up here and get some croissants.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Yay! I have a question, Steve.
Yes.
Is that a recipe that your grandma taught you, or is that something that you came up with out of your own culinary ability?
I came up on my own just because simply a lot of Italian cookies are actually, Italians love hard cookies, like they love biscottis, they love tortellis, and they love pazzalis. Pazzalis are basically, they look like flattened waffles, and the thing is, a lot of those cookies require like hard boiling or steam, so it takes a long time to make
I'm
those
not
things.
complaining.
So, instead of going Italian, I went French with these.
Oh, I see.
So, thank you.
Yay!
Okay, Jeff.